Hello and oh, excuse me. Welcome to the Mum Boss Method podcast. As you probably can hear, I've got a bit of a cold. Excuse me. Just going to mute. Goodness me. It's been a week. It has been a bit of a week, I have to tell you. I've really not been very well. Which is, I think, really unfair considering how ill I was after Christmas. I think when I recorded last week's podcast, actually, wasn't I starting to feel a little bit ill? Yeah, I think I was. I think I was feeling a bit ill last Sunday. Yeah, it got worse. Anyway, I've got a cup of tea on the go, so you're going to have to excuse me. It's been a tough week. So I got the cold. We are having work done in the house, which I've never experienced. I've never lived through having work done in the house before. Man, there's a lot of dust. I'm super grateful that we are able to have work done in the house, and I don't want to dismiss that. But yeah, there's a lot of dust and I'm not used to it. But anyway, I am definitely feeling better. I probably sound worse than I actually feel. Oh, here comes the dog. Right, you're coming in here now, are you? I probably sound, sorry about that, I probably sound worse than I actually feel. I'm just at I'm sorry, too much information, but I'm at the snot stage. So, anyway, this week's podcast is I wanted to talk about why it's okay to prioritize your health as a mum. And a lot of what I talk about has this red thread running through it. My tagline is show up for you. I come from this angle of self-care, whether you come to me and you listen to me because you want to lose weight or you want to get fitter and stronger, you want to feel better. It doesn't matter. The angle that I come from is this angle of self-care because that's linked to my story and how I got where I am. So you will hear me talking about these things often in my content. And I thought I haven't done a podcast like this for a while. I'm going to talk about this. Why not talk about this at the beginning of the year? So, I know as a mum, as a woman, I know the feeling all too well, the feeling of guilt that can creep in, and really, we're talking about overcoming guilt here. Um, those feelings of guilt that creep in when I think about taking time for myself, whether it's a workout, a quiet cup of coffee, or just some time to unwind, it can feel really, really selfish. And I want to help you shift that narrative today and explore how caring for yourself ultimately not only benefits you, but benefits the rest of your family as well. And I really want to reassure you that I still feel this now occasionally myself. So I'm so much better at making time for myself. I do still occasionally feel guilty for doing it or saying sorry for doing it. And I catch myself. And only yesterday, I was on a course all day. I was out of the house from 6:30 a.m. I didn't get back till 8 p.m. And whilst the course was a work course, it wasn't a mandatory work course. It wasn't something that I had to go on in order to do my job. But it was something I wanted to do for myself. I wanted to invest that in myself. I still felt guilty. I still found myself apologizing to Tom and Charlie for not being there all day. And I know this is such a common problem that mums and women in general face. And so I think it's really important to talk about it, but also try to normalize not feeling guilty for looking after ourselves. Um, so first, let's take a moment to explore guilt as a feeling, as a word, and as something that many mothers and women face, often questioning whether they're doing enough, for everyone else, and whether they should therefore not be doing something for themselves. Now, you might find yourself feeling guilty about spending time away from your children, or perhaps guilty for wanting a moment to breathe amongst the chaos of motherhood and life and work. And I know that society sets really high expectations, and we really struggle not to buy into those high expectations that society has set and we then transfer onto ourselves. It's so easy to feel overwhelmed. But here's the truth: prioritizing your health, prioritizing yourself is essential. When we take care of ourselves, we're not just enhancing our own well-being, we're also setting a positive example for our kids and for the people around us that see us as role models. And also, this plays into how happy and healthy the rest of our family are. So I want you to think about it. When you feel energized, when you feel happy, when you're more present and engaged with your family and your friends and your connections and your relationships, it's a win-win situation because everyone else feels more energized and happier, and there's more connection and there's more presence. But those constant feelings of guilt are still really tough. They're tough on your mental health, on your physical health. And I know this from absolute first-hand experience, because this is one of the reasons that I started the Mum Boss method, because for years I let that guilt take over me. I had guilt about working too much, then guilt when I didn't work, and then guilt when I didn't do the school drop-offs, or I mean, I hardly ever did the school drop-offs. Tom did most of them. Guilt when I went to the gym. And I got myself into such a poor state mentally and physically that I ended up being signed off for 2 months. Now, looking back with hindsight, it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, because I'm here doing this now and I'm helping other women to prioritize themselves and change their lives. But, my route to getting here and doing this, everything happens for a reason, but I know it probably didn't have to go on for as long as it did. Sorry, sip of tea. I don't want to waste the heat of my tea. I really don't like drinking tea when it's lukewarm. It has to be really quite piping hot. So I'm going to finish this. Mm, good tea. Okay, so let's think a little bit about why prioritizing yourself is essential. Now, one of my clients this week was going back to work. She's a teacher, and she almost didn't come to our 6:30 a.m. Monday morning workout because she was wanting to get into work early and get ahead of the game. And her husband said to her, "Why are you putting work before your health?" And it really struck a chord with her. And it really struck a chord with a lot of my clients. It's so true. It's so true. Think about that. Why are you putting work before your health? I want you to think about how many things you're willing to put before your own health and well-being. It doesn't have to be big things like a workout. It could be that you delay going to bed because you're scrolling on your phone or you're watching Netflix. It could be that you say yes to someone when you really should be saying no. And that means you have to change your plans around. And whilst that doesn't necessarily mean you miss a plan or you cancel a plan, it actually puts a lot of pressure and stress on you and you're rushing around. It could be even the example of, putting this happens in our house quite a lot. Being the mum to a teen, he's obsessed with takeaways. He absolutely loves a takeaway. And don't get me wrong, I really like a takeaway, but I think I'm so much more choosy about when and what we have as a takeaway, because a lot of the times I find them overly expensive and I don't enjoy them as much as I used to. So I'm really quite choosy about when we have a takeaway. He would have them every week, a couple of times a week, if we could. And if he was the type of child that really, wore me down because he wanted a takeaway, I would be putting his wants and needs ahead of my own if I gave in. So I would be, putting his desire for a kebab or a curry ahead of my want and desire to be healthy and balanced. And, when we talk about self-care, because I'm not just talking about your health and fitness, I'm not just talking about, your exercise, your nutrition, although that is part of this. I'm talking about, your downtime as well. When we think about physical health, it's really obvious. We know that self-care in terms of that exercise, in terms of that nutrition, are really important for our physical health. But it's also really important to have a balance with those things. And that's self-care as well. When I was in my early 30s, probably late 20s, early 30s, but particularly early 30s after I'd had Charlie, I thought that, training 6 days a week was what I needed to do to get where I wanted to be. I thought that eating a really strict diet was the best way to be healthy and fit. I thought that not, ever eating chocolate or drinking wine or having a takeaway was the way I had to be. And it's important to have that balance as well. It's important for your physical well-being, but it's important for your mental well-being. And maybe you recognize this scenario that I was discussing with a friend this morning. So I want you to imagine you haven't made any time for yourself all week. Everyone needs you to do things for you. Everyone wants you. And you haven't sat down for the whole week for 5 minutes alone and just be still. Like, you just haven't done that. And you then start to feel resentful, don't you? You feel resentful of the kids and the other half and the friends and the work. You feel resentful of everyone. It affects your mood. It affects your relationships. The view you have on yourself, it affects that. Oh, I must do more, I must do more, I must do more. It affects your resilience. There are loads of things it affects. But the thing that I think, don't get me wrong, if we don't have health, we don't have anything. But I think the real game changer, and this links into my point around wanting to help you reframe, taking time for yourself and self-care. But the game changer for me is taking that time, prioritizing your needs, prioritizing your health, prioritizing the things you need to do for you is actually going to benefit your family. And like I said, this is the part that is most going to help you get over the guilt when every time you want to, take time to go and exercise or go and meet a friend for a coffee or just have 10 minutes of peace and quiet with your book or even just a cup of coffee staring out the window. And, that really holds true for me, because if I compare myself now at age 44 to myself age 32, 33, 34, even up to 36, 37, I am a much nicer mum, wife, friend, daughter, sister, coach. I'm a much nicer person to be around now that I regularly take time and make time for my own self-care. Okay. I am me living the way I live now benefits my family so much more. And when I don't take that time for myself, it is noticed. It comes out in my mood. It is noticed. And I think, if anything, if you still really struggle with the guilt of self-care, think about how much nicer you would be if you just implemented a few small things into your week every week. How much happier everyone in the house would be. And I think it's really important when we're talking about this is, we want to reframe this, our thinking about self-care and move away from guilt. But it's really important to understand what I truly mean when I talk about self-care. I want you to think of self-care as being a necessity. And I've talked about this on podcasts before. I definitely have. I don't see me going to the gym now as part of my self-care routine. I deem it as a necessity. Brushing my teeth level necessity. I do not want to get a filling. I've got one filling. At age 44, I've got one filling. I do not want toothache. I do not want another filling. I do not want the expense of it. I don't want the experience of it. So I take care of my teeth. It's necessary. Brushing my teeth is not self-care. It's personal hygiene. It's a necessary act. Okay. And that's how I see things like going to the gym and getting my steps in and eating a balanced diet most of the time. I see them as necessities now because they're so ingrained. I've been doing them for so long. But the problem is, in order to get to that being such a habit that you don't even think about, we really need to define some of these things that are and aren't self-care. Lots of people, and I think we are moving away from this a little bit now, but I know I have this conversation with my clients often, but you often talk about self-care as getting our hairs done, getting our nails done, our hairs done, getting our hair done, getting our nails done, going for a massage or a bath or drinking a bottle of wine. Most of those things are not self-care, in my opinion. They are personal grooming and drinking some alcohol. So consider how you can reframe your thoughts and beliefs around self-care, and instead stop thinking about it as a luxury. I want you to start considering it as a necessity. Perhaps telling yourself that you deserve to take that time, and also considering how the whole family will benefit from it even. And I think it's really important as well to think broader in terms of self-care and prioritizing yourself. And I've definitely said this on the podcast before. So I see getting my nails done as a complete luxury. I like having my nails done. I see them as a luxury. I see having a cleaner as an act of self-care. I see that as a necessity. And believe me, my cleaners won't be coming. Well, they didn't come this week and they won't come next week because of the building work. And any of you that have done, work on your house, it is I'm looking at my desk now and I can see dust on my desk. And I only cleaned my desk yesterday. The dust is in the air and it's falling. And I cannot wait for the work to be done and for my cleaners to come in, because it's a necessity, because I do not want to spend 4 hours of my Saturday cleaning. So we need to remember that, sometimes self-care and prioritizing yourself, they're not just about the things that you do for yourself, they're the things that you actively don't do. So it could be setting boundaries. And a boundary could be as small as someone is calling you and you don't pick up the phone right there and then. It could be saying no or cancelling plans. Okay. So it's really important to not just think about, I want you to move away from the hair and the nails and the massage and the facial from being self-care. But I also want you to not just think about it as doing your exercise and your walk and your, getting your 5 a day and your protein. It's also some of the things that we actively choose not to do. So now that we've really defined and reframed self-care and prioritizing ourselves, I want to give you some practical tips for making time for yourself. Now, to help us to shift our perspective. So the last thing I talked about there was, reframing what self-care is. And if you're still struggling with that, trying to do some things like journaling, gratitude journaling, using positive affirmations, but I would definitely start with gratitude journaling. So thinking of at least 3 things every day that you're grateful for is a great act of self-care, because it can put you in to a really positive mindset. And then when you've found gratitude journaling and you've made that a habit, you can move into, should you want to, more wider journaling. So not diary keeping, but more wider journaling around your thoughts, your feelings, your behavior, how you're showing up, and things that are making you happy, things that are triggering you. And these are so important for our mental well-being, for keeping us really mindful, keeping us in the present. And that will really help you to make that mindset shift. But I want to be really practical with you now, and I want to give you some effective strategies for making sure that you can take self-care time. And the first thing that I want you to take away from this is, do not leave it to chance. Don't just expect a window of opportunity to arrive in your diary that you can label that self-care time. You need to be intentional with this. You need to go into this and make sure that you are planning in that time. Okay. And you're putting it into your schedule, you're making that appointment with with yourself. As I said, I don't see going to the gym and eating healthily and walking as things that I find hard to do. I don't see them as really self-care anymore. They're just part of my day. But I still, every week, every Sunday, I schedule in my self-care time. I schedule in where my workouts are. I schedule in when I'm going to walk every day. I schedule in, I plan my meals and plan my shopping around those meals. And that is all part of prioritizing myself, because I'm making sure these things are in my diary and they are done, because they don't happen by chance. Life isn't better when I wing it. So schedule it in. You can't just expect the time to appear. You have to make the time for these things. You have to look at your diary with a really critical eye, and you have to say, where am I wasting time? Where can I make time for doing this? Now, one of the best ways that I find for me to take self-care time is, or just find some peace and some quiet, is by getting up earlier than Tom and Charlie. Now, I get up mostly a good 45 minutes to an hour before them, but you don't have to go that far. And in fact, with any of these things, I would recommend you start small. So you could start with getting up 10 to 15 minutes earlier, even if that doesn't mean you're necessarily getting up earlier than the kids and the other half. Just getting up 10 to 15 minutes earlier every day so that it's not a rush is a great act of self-care. So this week, one of my one-to-one clients, she told me how her mornings can be a bit of a rush. So we did two things. She set her alarm 10 minutes earlier and she didn't snooze. And that has been game-changing for her. She's felt calmer. She's felt more collected in the morning. That's self-care. That is absolutely self-care. So how about starting smaller with some other activities as well? So, if you want to get out and get walking, how about just setting that as 10 minutes? Or if you want to start reading more regularly, then give yourself a chapter or a certain number of pages a day. If you've got small kids, involve them in some of your activities as well, family walks or outdoor games. That's a great way of combining quality time with self-care. One of my favorite things to do over the Christmas and New Year period, it's over New Year, we go and visit my dad and stepmom in Suffolk. They're right by the beach, and I just love taking the dog and for all of us, when we can, to go and get a lovely beach walk. And sometimes we're walking for 20 minutes in silence. It depends who's there. If my nephew's there, it's normally not silent. But I absolutely love just doing, spending that time walking and combining that kind of peace and quiet and that freedom of the beach with walking with my family. Now, lots of my clients do crafts or jigsaw puzzles as part of their self-care. And like I said earlier, remember that self-care is also about the things that you actively don't do. And I should have mentioned earlier, if you want to listen to episode 188, that episode is about setting boundaries. So if setting boundaries and saying no is something you need to get better at, then make sure you give that a listen. So as I said, I started on this journey to creating the Mum Boss method because I really needed to get over my mum guilt. And I did that by starting small, but I also did it by making sure that I recognized and celebrated the differences that it made to my life. So I talk all the time about, you shouldn't just measure your progress on a number on the scales. And I want you to encourage you to think about how you are feeling internally, not just physically, but internally, how you're thinking, your thought patterns, your behaviors. And this is why journaling is so, so helpful. Because you can really start to notice the difference in your mindset and your mood and how much happier you are when you start doing this. And that is exactly how I started. I started by implementing some of these rituals and some of these routines, every day, and building them up. So what I really want you to think about is where you can start to bring in more time and space for yourself. What are the things you want to actively start doing? As with everything, don't try and add it all at once, but start to add in small things. I want you to start thinking about some of the things you need to say no to, some of the things that don't serve you, some of the things you need to walk away from, so that you can prioritize your own health, your own self-care, and remember that that is a necessity. It's not a nice to have, it's not a luxury. Now, I've talked about planning and scheduling in this podcast. If you would like to grab my absolutely free Planning Your Week guide, the link for that is in the show notes. That will help you to do just this. That will help you to plan in your walks, your workouts, plan your food, plan your menus, plan in your self-care time. It's the way that I do this every week. It's the way that my clients do this every week. It's really simple to follow, and I would love for it to help you. Okay, I need to go and get ready to go out for Sunday lunch now. That's another act of self-care I'm giving to myself this week, is not cooking Sunday lunch in a house that is just full of stuff at the moment. So I'm going to go and do that. If you liked this episode, please share it and rate and review it. And I will see you next week, my loves. Have a good one. Bye.